Okay, so let's unpack this. We're going to dig into the Rivian automotive story today.
Right.
You remember them, right? The EV maker that just burst onto the scene, impressed a lot of people, critics, buyers,
Yeah.
and landed that huge Amazon delivery van deal.
Mm-hmm. A really big deal.
Yeah. And for a little while there, like coming out of 2023, the sources we've got here suggest they really seem to have some serious momentum. People were even whispering, next Tesla.
That was definitely the buzz for a bit.
But something's changed. Fast forward to now, and, that initial excitement seems to have faded quite a bit.
Yeah, it feels different now.
Our sources, we've got articles, research notes, all the stuff you pulled together.
Yeah.
They paint a picture of, challenges. So our mission here in this deep dive is to take all this information and figure out, okay, what's really going on now? What's Rivian doing about it?
Their strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, crucially, what does the future maybe look like for them, especially with everyone watching for that new R2 vehicle they've announced?
And the reality check the sources give us is, it's pretty stark, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the fundamental problem they all kind of point to is just how brutal the car industry is. I mean, it's incredibly competitive.
Right.
And real, long-term success usually means you need a whole lineup of vehicles, different price points, different types.
Which Rivian doesn't really have yet.
Exactly. As the sources note, right now they've basically got the R1T truck, the R1S SUV, and the commercial delivery vans, the EDVs, not a full range.
Mm-hmm.
And the core issue, the thing really hitting their recent numbers, according to this data, is that demand for the current R1s, it's fading. These vehicles, they were cool, but they're getting a bit older now in a market that moves really fast, especially EVs.
Makes sense.
And if you look at the delivery numbers in these reports, I mean, it's plain as day. There's a clear decline showing up. So the immediate question, the really pressing one that the sources are asking is, can Rivian possibly get back to growth in 2025, before the R2 is even supposed to launch in 2026?
Yeah. That's a tough spot for the near term, a huge hurdle. But, one thing that kept popping up in the sources, which I found interesting, was about Rivian's customers.
Oh, yeah.
It might be a relatively small group, sure, but the sources describe them as, incredibly passionate.
Yeah.
Really enthusiastic.
True believers.
Kind of. You see it online. These dedicated owner groups, they organize trips, adventures. They seem really connected to the whole Rivian idea.
Right, the lifestyle aspect.
Exactly. And Rivian, it seems like they know they've got this demand issue, so they're trying something new to tap into that energy.
Okay.
The sources are highlighting that they're actually launching their first big, 360 brand marketing campaign.
Really?
Yeah, think about that. Their first major push across all the channels, digital, maybe some traditional ads, social media, the works. It feels like it's specifically designed to lean on that core group of fans.
Makes sense to leverage them.
Right. The sources even quote their VP of marketing, Denise Cherry. She says something like, this campaign is about celebrating the people who define what Rivian truly is. Mm-hmm. And for our first 360 brand campaign, we wanted to make sure our owners were the spotlight.
So focus on the base.
Seems like it. And this is a big change because before this, the sources suggest Rivian mostly just relied on, word of mouth, organic buzz.
Which worked for a while, clearly.
It did. But given the competition and that fading R1 demand we just talked about, the question is, how much can this marketing push actually move the needle for 2025? Really boost demand and growth?
Yeah.
Do the sources give us any clues on that?
Well, they don't put a hard number on it. This campaign will boost sales by X%. But the strong implication is that while it's probably good for the brand long term, it's probably not going to be the silver bullet for the immediate volume problem in 2025.
Okay.
And that leads us straight into what the sources all identify as the real make or break thing for the company.
Yeah.
The R2 vehicle.
Right. The next big thing.
Exactly. This is the product that's designed to take over from the R1s, basically, and let Rivian operate on a totally different level, a different scale.
Okay, so what's the big deal with the R2? What makes it so critical, according to the sources?
Well, several key things. First off, the price. This is huge.
Yeah.
The R2 is expected to start somewhere around $45,000.
Wow. Okay.
Think about that. That's roughly half the price of the R1 vehicle.
That opens up a much bigger market, presumably.
Totally different market segment, exactly.
Okay.
Then there's the production side of things.
Ah, right. Scale.
Yeah. The sources suggest the R2 platform could support an annual production capacity of like 155,000 units.
155,000. That's way more than the R1s, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's nearly double the combined capacity they have for the R1S and R1T right now. So if the demand is there, they could theoretically build a lot more cars.
Gotcha.
Plus, the sources say the R2 should also benefit from, improved tech and, importantly, a lower cost bill of materials, meaning the parts are cheaper to make or buy compared to the R1s.
More profitable, potentially.
Hopefully, yeah. And there was also this really interesting strategic move they made, highlighted in the sources, about where they're going to build it initially.
Oh, yeah. The factory stuff.
Right. They decided to swap the initial R2 production. Instead of starting it at their planned new factory in Georgia, which isn't even built yet, they're going to start it at their existing factory in Illinois, where they built an expansion.
Why do that?
Well, the sources point to kind of a double benefit. It helps fill up the capacity they already have in Illinois.
Makes sense. Use what you've got.
Right. And financially, it was a huge deal. The reports say it saved the company something like $2.25 billion.
Wow. Okay, that's significant savings.
Massive. So the message coming through loud and clear from these sources is the company's next big growth phase, the one after the R1s have done their job, is basically all in. It completely hinges on successfully launching and scaling up the R2 and then the R3 and R3X vehicles that are supposed to come off that same platform later.
Okay, so if we put all these pieces together, the near-term picture the sources are painting looks pretty challenging.
Yeah, that seems fair to say.
It sounds like Rivian getting back to significant growth in 2025 is, well, unlikely.
Yeah.
Unless that new marketing campaign somehow works wonders on R1 demand.
Which seems like a long shot based on the tone here.
Right. And the sources also mentioned there aren't many other obvious, near-term catalysts for the stock price either.
And layered on top of that, the sources do note that the sort of general feeling around EVs right now, the broader environment, is seen as pretty pessimistic. They even mention policy changes from the current administration affecting the industry. Now, they mostly frame this just as part of the overall market mood shift, not necessarily something aimed squarely at crippling Rivian itself. We're just reporting what the sources highlight as context here.
Got it. Neutral reporting on the context. But it adds to the headwinds.
It does. However, there is one quite positive sign that the sources make sure to point out.
Oh, good news.
Yeah, a bit. Rivian has actually managed to achieve 2 straight quarters of gross profit.
Okay. So making money on the cars they are selling before other costs.
Exactly. For a young company still scaling up, getting into profitable production, even just on a gross level on the cars they're currently making, that's actually a really important operational step, a milestone.
That is significant. Okay.
But ultimately, the perspective the sources seem to recommend or lean towards is really taking the long view.
Look further out.
Yeah. They suggest looking past 2025 is kind of essential. And it's still an if, but if Rivian can pull off the R2 production ramp-up starting in 2026 like they plan, well, that year is expected to look a whole lot better for the company.
Right. So a tough year or so ahead, potentially, but maybe brighter skies in 2026 if the R2 plan works.
That seems to be the core narrative from these sources.
And that kind of brings it back to you listening to this. What does this whole Rivian journey we've just traced, from the initial hype, the luxury niche products, to these current struggles, and now this big strategic shift towards a cheaper, higher volume future with the R2. What does it tell us?
Yeah, what are the takeaways?
What insights can we maybe pull from these sources about the typical life cycle of innovative companies?
Yeah.
Or just the brutal difficulty of scaling up manufacturing in a crazy competitive field like cars?
It really highlights that, doesn't it?
And maybe how incredibly critical the success of just one single major product launch like the R2 is for Rivian, how crucial that can be for a company's entire future.
Mm-hmm. So much writing on it.
So at the heart of this whole deep dive, it really feels like that core tension the sources reveal. You've got the immediate pain, the struggle with fading demand for the current stuff.
Right.
Standing right against these huge long-term hopes, all pinned on that cheaper, higher volume R2 that's supposed to arrive in 2026.
The present versus the future bet.
Exactly. And the sources make it crystal clear just how much Rivian is betting the farm, basically, on the R2 for its next chapter, its next stage of growth. It leaves us with this kind of provocative thought, maybe something for you to mull over.
Okay.
The whole story seems to hinge on the R2 succeeding. But what if? What happens if the demand for the R2, even though it's cheaper, even with more production capacity, what if it just doesn't take off as strongly as everyone hopes?
Yeah, what if the demand isn't quite there?
How does putting so many eggs in that one future basket, relying so heavily on a single future vehicle platform, how does that fundamentally shape Rivian's risk profile over the next few critical years?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the multi-billion-dollar question in this case.